Hello, my name is Hanalei Jennings, and my research is on the introduction of the potato into Ireland and the changes that resulted in. I'm interested in this research because of my interest in Ireland as a whole, my background being a second, third generation Irish American, and the link between the potatoes and the Irish. Now, potatoes are originated from South America in the Andean Mountains, and I am curious to how they became so synonymous with the Irish and Ireland as a whole. They became so widespread, but that didn't happen necessarily overnight. So this is a map that shows the range of the potatoes, specifically the lumper potato, which ended up being chosen over others because of its resilience to disease. But as you can see, it was widespread throughout the island. And part of this was how well potatoes thrived in Ireland compared to the more native crops. Potatoes thrived even in poor soil and with soil that didn't drain very well in a very wet climate. Other grains did not do well with this, and there was very low yield, especially in the western portion of Ireland towards the Atlantic there. Most of that region was pretty desolate before the potato and just did not do well at all with cultivating the agriculture and crops that they had before. In this map here, it does show that more than 2.5 million acres of Ireland is complete bogland, just very poorly drained, standing water nearly. Now, nutrition of potatoes was a major reason why it became so popular in Ireland, because it's even in many sources that you only need a dairy product and potatoes to get all of your essential vitamins and nutrients. So all the Irish could sustain off of potatoes and not need anything else, really, and they could be okay. This ability to sustain life through the potato alone, with dairy products that is, and just resulted in a massive population boom. And as I said before, the west of Ireland was fairly desolate. You could not farm very much. It was very rocky and full of bogs where there wasn't any rocks. But with the potato, there was a migration across the island, and the west was filled with more people than ever before. And as seen as this map, parts of it were fairly dense compared to the other more populated regions in the east. Now, as I said before, potatoes were slow to completely integrate into Irish agriculture. This was because of the agricultural rotations that they traditionally used. There was 1 year of a cereal grain such as wheat, then 1 year of barley or beans, and then 1 year of fallow to leave the ground to restore nutrients. Now, at first there was no room for potatoes in this process, but over time the Irish realized that instead of the year of fallow, they could do a year of potatoes. Because of the English colonization of Ireland, English landlords ruled over much of the agricultural land. So, with this year of fallow being gone with a year of potatoes, it was good for the Irish in that they could make more, grow more crops, but bad in the sense that the landlords saw that profit increasing and upped the rent. That made it even more so that the Irish needed to have potatoes because they needed to grow more to pay the rent, but then they also needed to feed themselves. Potatoes weren't that desired as a form of payment or an export, so they ended up eating the potatoes and selling the rest of the crops. A new cultural technique that came into play with potatoes was the lazy bed, called as such because it was considered a lazy way to farm, not using a typical flat plot. These were raised beds as seen in this picture. This is a modern picture of the Aran Islands lazy beds. but there is a trench dug between the plots of potatoes to help drain the soil a little bit to increase the yield and decrease potato rot. And then in those beds is piled with fertilizer and manure to help increase the yield again. And here, Rawson, in 1808, did an article in the newspaper explaining the profit margin of the lazy bed versus a stereotypical flat plot that had been traditionally used. In other terms, the politics and the culture that changed with potatoes is, since these Irish were ruled by the English, they were always resisting, and with potatoes being in the mix, the Irish used potatoes as a form of resistance. So the United Irishmen targeted potato crops and just ruined them so that they couldn't pay their landlords, and the Irish would fight back that way. There's also tons of poems and songs about potatoes, including this one. Dear praties, we cannot do without them. They grow in our fields, and our men they employ. Talk as you will, you must say this about them. That's a fine mealy pratie, an Irishman's joy. She's just reiterating the need for potatoes in their diet and culture to help sustain life and whatnot. Now, the importance of my research is to show how that link between potatoes and the Irish was just developed and grew, and how that did eventually lead and was the precursor to the Great Potato Famine, as that was the loss of over 1 million lives and a giant factor of Irish diaspora over the world, and why we can see so many Irish in each country, especially in the United States.